Nice.
Recently on Twitter, Muta have put out a 48-minute video. That 48-minute video is part one of a call that we went through part of in our last video on the Completionist. I thought what we'd do today is go through a bit more of it, because this is quite interesting. The level of guilt tripping and mental gymnastics should be laid bare for all of you to understand, and it's only part one.
Like that's just a fucked up situation to be in. Yeah. And I don't know, Carl, I don't know what else we can really ask. I think every question.
Yeah, well, I just want to know, like, you said that you don't take care of the books, but you were aware of what were on them. Is that correct?
As far as what, like, expenses go?
Expenses and the fact that the cash was sitting there. Have you been aware of that the entire time?
I did not know. I was not aware the entire time that the money was not being donated.
Then why did on multiple occasions did you, on various social media platforms, say the money was or had been donated? Making these assertions does not help you in the slightest. To then feign ignorance now, or potentially reveal your actual literal ignorance now, does not help you.
I was aware that I was reclaiming my costs and the expenses, but we had to make sure, because it's legally speaking, you have to do it, otherwise it's against the law, that it was under a certain amount and that it wasn't too much for, and purely just to, like, you know, buying hot sauces or paying for the stuff that we do during the show. Like,
yeah.
The expenses were never more than a certain amount, and it was always.
I'm not going to lie, your knowledge of the expense system means very little to me. It really does mean very little to me. There could be a separate discussion about it, but it is a massive walk away from the very simple question you were asked that you have provided an answer to, but you're clearly floundering.
You know, that's the only expense that I know of. It's the only expense that I've ever really seen. And to be above board about it all, like, I've always been like, hey, if the expense is too much, don't worry about it. Like, I'll take care of. I'll hate the loss, because it's, in my mind, it's going to charity anyways. It's all going to a good cause, and I'm not trying to embezzle. I'm just trying to do things right.
But as we discovered in the last video on this subject, you only did right when you were told about it. Either that is absolute unprofessionalism on your part, negligence on your part, or genuine stupidity.
Well, that's just money you're spending from your own, like, that's just a check you're writing personally. There's nothing, wrong about that.
So did anyone?
And I'm not writing into the foundation. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Did anyone tell you?
You were notified that the money was sitting there the whole time?
I knew it was sitting there at a certain point, and that's what made me proactively go about it. Like,
do you know when that point was?
I was made aware in 2021 when the money hadn't moved yet.
You know, it might have done you some good, because I know you want to move away from being a YouTuber to focus on game creation. Had your reputation not been destroyed, it would have done you some good in 2021 to publicly come out and say, by the way, I may have lied to you guys. Sorry about that. Allow me to remedy this issue now. That said, that would have been 7.5 to 8 years after it was raised. It doesn't get any better as time goes by, and I'll be honest, I'm pretty sure there's like a window of acceptable donation period. So I'd like to believe the vast majority can agree here, you screwed this up several years earlier.
And that's what made me go, that's not fucking cool. And that's when I got personally involved to move it. And
did anyone?
2021, last year, 2022.
Yeah, did anyone tell you that the money was going somewhere before then? Were you being misled?
No. No one told me anything. I assumed that it was all going to a charity, and I assumed incorrectly.
On this channel, I like to, many times I've said it in fact over the years, I like to say assumption is the mother of all effed up choices. Considering your involvement with the charity, you would have thought you'd make more of a concerted effort to understand. Considering your motivation is someone you lost, understandably, you are quite tied to this, emotionally and actually monetarily invested in it. But then when it came to the actual part of doing something, you didn't. That's interesting.
Okay, so you still thought it was going to the UCSF?
Whether it's UCSF or a partner that's not listed on our website, because we don't have any other benefactors currently. Like that's why I was like, well, they're taking care of it, but nothing was ever brought to my attention. I just knew that conversations were happening between Alzheimer's Association of America, AFTD Foundation, UCSF started a new organization, I think called like Bluefin or Blue Group, which is like supposed to be their 501c.
In your video refuting all this, you resigned from your position. What is the point of you even having a position in the first place if you weren't paying any attention to it? You were the face of this. Quite literally, you were the face of it. Your name, your reputation hinged on you honouring what was raised and sending it, ensuring it was sent to the correct places. This is a kind of negligence I'd expect from somebody who can't be asked to do their taxes right, from somebody who claims benefits they're not entitled to, or an adult that refuses to do the grown-up things correctly and then feigns ignorance when it suits them. Oh wait, that's this.
Part of their organization. So I know I have a paper trail of us talking to other organizations as early as 2020 and 2021 in an attempt to pay them what they were owed. And most of the conversations we had from some of the bigger orgs like Alzheimer's, they were like, look, if you're not going to pay more than 6 figures or 6+ figures of what they asked for, then you're just going to waste it. So the goal on the back end for my family that I've been told is like, we're just going to raise a bunch of money and then give it to one org and like make a bigger impact rather than just giving smaller donations that don't move the needle.
Okay, so there's a valid point in there. There really is. Raise more money, give it a larger sum, the money can be going further. However, that was not the point of the money donated in the first place, and you never stated that was your intent in the first place. You misled those, whether intentional or not, who gave the money believing it was going to be donated to charity. If I fired up a stream now and did it for charity, people would expect me to donate the money raised immediately after the stream, or when the stream period for raising the money came to an end. That's what people expect of you unless you explicitly state otherwise. You did not, therefore you misled. There's another word for that. It's a useful word. But by all means, use a rather handy scapegoat of, but the charities say 6 figures or more would actually move the needle.
See, now the thing is, this wouldn't really even have been a story at all had whoever was running your website or your social media channels had just made that an apparent fact, to start off with. But the problem is, like, when you read the comments of some of the people that are donating, they think that money is going right there that year, right? Because that's just what any viewer is going to expect, right?
Exactly. So when people accuse you of fraud, charity fraud, this would be where it comes from. A complete lack of transparency on the part of Jirard and others involved in this fundraising has led to this situation. It can also be argued, since vast amounts of that were raised years ago, it would have had more of an impact then than it did now, or does now.
I mean, look, I'm not trying to say please don't make videos on me, because that's just what's going to happen. I can't stop you guys from doing your thing. What I do want to do is do the right thing possible, because in my mind, I mean, the most important thing to me right now in all of this is that, one, I'm not trying to dishonor or ruin the legacy of my mother who put me here. The reason why I'm on YouTube and why I'm here is because of the life that she's given me and the things that I have. Oh, you guys there? Hello?
No offense intended. Firstly, this has to be a fair use little bit here, yeah. But no offense intended. This now sounds like you're building up, gearing up for a guilt trip, emolument situation type deal.
The last thing I want to do is ruin the legacy of my family, of my mom and her memory, especially because this is such a personal thing for the last 25 years of my life. I'm not trying to be like, do you guys want money to help me hide this? It's not what this is at all. I'm just asking from a humanity perspective of, like, if I am the target of this, I have 20 mouths to feed. I have sponsors. I have a business. I'm trying to make video games. I'm trying to get out of content creation.
I fully understand that we all have responsibilities away from YouTube. And some of us, as time goes by, want to distance ourselves from this platform. I fully understand that, ish. I'm a slave for views, so no, I don't get it. But accountability and responsibility is fundamentally important. If you understand the ecosystem of the online space, you would know the online space is nowhere near as forgiving, especially when you build your name and reputation off of something and are then found to have not fulfilled your end of the bargain. While a false equivalence, this reminds me of the likes of Mundane Matt. He built his name off of being falsely flagged by Zoe Quinn, yet later on he was found to have flagged other people. You grew off the back of and benefited from claiming you were raising money for charity, but never specified that you were not donating the money immediately. Yet then you went on to claim over the years that it was or had been or was going to be donated, and yet it was not being donated. My false equivalence sounds eerily sort of similar in a way, doesn't it?
So I don't have to worry about YouTube anymore and do better things in the world. And I just know, because of my track record of things like G4 exploding, me being friends with JonTron when he was a racist.
If that were the case, and guilt by association was being applied here, your career would have been over sooner. You'll be hard-pressed to find someone on YouTube that hasn't been friendly or friends with someone that has gone on to be cancelled or who is, by today's standards, haram. It is not remotely comparable to your actions or lack thereof in the context of you not donating the money to charity because not enough has to be 6 figures, more impactful, but you never told anyone at the same time that that was what was meant to be or what would have to happen before you could donate it.
Pulling one thread about the charity thing is going to upheave my entire life in a way that scares the living crap out of me. And I don't want to go home tonight and tell everyone, hey, there is a gigantic thing coming to claim my career, and you all have to close down and find somewhere else to do. I know this is shitting me to say this. I'm not trying to ask for sympathy or anything.
Forgive me if this seems a bit too obvious, but you kind of are, and I think you know that. Again, this is a very desperate presentation style from Jirard, 100%. I can understand that when put in this position, one does start to worry about the consequence. But the fact remains, you should have worried about the consequence years ago. You should have worried about it 2 years ago when you claimed to have been first alerted to the fact the money wasn't donated. You should have been open and transparent with that, instead of wasting everyone's time with the 20-minute video and 50+ sources linked.
But this kind of stuff, I mean, I've been following your guys' stuff for years. The stuff with Billy Mitchell, Karl, the stuff that you've done, Muta, with tons of content creators over the years. Like, there's no nuance to this. People are going to see this and they're going to immediately go, that Jirard guy who's been nice to a bunch of people actually isn't very nice overall. Him, let's get rid of him.
You were right. There are definitely more casual viewers who are going to look upon this and go, all right, Jirard's a crappy person. Bye. I looked at this and thought, okay, we have to see how this plays out a little, but we've also got to look at this quickly, critically, apply some skepticism, and decide whether or not there's any truth to what they claimed or what you refuted with. Upon looking at it closer, which took about an hour, yes, you don't look good. This phone call doesn't help either, nor do any legal threats.
I've got nothing in my pockets to do that. I have nothing. And so that's just where my head's at. I just want to be able to create content and do good in the world, and this is just going to, it's, even if I survive this somehow, even if this is like, people are like, well, whatever, that's how it is. Yeah. It's going to take the passion out of what I do. People aren't going to trust me ever again. I'm not going to trust myself ever again. And I'm just going to walk away from all of this.
How you never considered that, based on content you have digested from Karl and Muta, that this could never happen to you, considering the consequences of other creators they've called out in the past, is astonishing. When you are fretting, you are worrying that this is now going to happen to you without blatantly trying to have them change it. So you've employed guilt tripping to do that into preventing something from happening that has to happen because you did not honor your agreement with many donors.
Like, I just, this is like me being like, great, so I'm out. Not just of content creation or being an online personality. I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna disappear and start over and never talk to anyone ever again. And that's the spiraling that I've been dealing with the last 3 days of talking to therapists and doctors and just figuring this whole thing out, because I knew this was coming a couple of days ago because of the email, and I'm like, well...
It's somewhat impressive to me that even with multiple warnings in fact, whether that be a few years ago when you found out the money had not been donated, allegedly, found out, or whether it be a few days before the video came out that you were going to be blasted for not donating the money, that you still did not do anything positive to make sure the ball was rolling. You just tried to guilt trip the two people making the video into not releasing the video.
I mean, my personal belief is I really do feel like this is the internal civil war. I mean, he says, what can I do to make it right? Honestly, the thing he can really do is just send that money to an actual organization in its entirety. I think $600,000 plus is enough money to make an actual difference, right?
As Willie Mack had pointed out when the videos first came out, it would have made more of an impact had the money been donated when it had been raised. The argument can be made that extra had been accumulated over the years, but it doesn't matter. Money was raised over 9.5 years ago. That money should have been donated. But it would certainly dampen, lessen, reduce the impact of the criticism with the money actually with those it's supposed to go to.
It doesn't matter. That's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if he can make a difference or not. He asked people for money. That has to go somewhere. It doesn't matter what he does. That's a red herring.
I pointed out earlier there were a number of deflections from the very first question. Karl is right to point out that this is also a red herring. The deflections and the red herrings don't take away from the fact that the money was sat on, and excuses were made for why it didn't go to where it was supposed to go to. Until he found out he was about to be blasted, Jirard that is, and then the money moved. And we already know from the last video we did here, he only did it when he found out about the video. Over the course of the next 7 minutes, Karl and Muta talk about the situation as a whole. In the context of Jirard, it doesn't really matter too much, more confirming things they do or don't know. Before we get to part 2 though, Muta has something to say that I think is quite important.
I think it does make it bad that this was definitely the mom and they were doing it in her name. I'll just say right now, there was definitely there was a lot of guilt tripping throughout that entire video, or throughout that entire call. We absolutely have to cover this just for this fact that this is an actual piece of fraud. Like, this is legitimate fraud. There's no question about it. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of, because we have clips of him talking about charities, right?
On to part 2. Jirard rejoins. How exciting.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
To answer your question, Karl, I don't have an answer. I think that's my up. I have personally donated to AFTD and Alzheimer's Association over the years, and that's where, again, I assumed the money was going there to support them as we were talking negotiations.
Right off the bat, it doesn't matter what you do with your money. What matters is what happened to the money being raised.
About working with them, I don't really have a true answer for that. And that's on me completely, and I will own up to that.
Yay for honesty.
But, again, it doesn't matter. You guys are going to say what you're going to say, and I can't stop it. But the important thing is that all the money is still in the account. None of it's spent erroneously. It's all above board. Like, it's not hiding in a Cayman account or anything like that. And that's the thing about 501c is that, like, if I did any of that, the minute I did any malpractice of that nature, literally the government would be like, hey, we're coming after you.
Well, I'm glad there's some accountability from that side of things. But the accountability now comes from you not doing what you said you were doing for 9 years.
That's, at least legally speaking, everything's above board. And I understand that the question isn't so much legality and so much more about morality in, me advertising this event and showing people sponsors and all that stuff. I totally get it. And, I don't know how much you guys heard of me before my phone died. And I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk. But,
Based on how long this video is, part of me thinks, and I'm surely right to think this, that the entire point of you being here is to try and, in a VC with 2 others that are critical of you, find a way to convince them to change course.
I'm at your guys' mercy as to what to do. Well, what would you rather have me do in the public space right now to do right by you guys? Because that's all I want to do is do the right thing. And
so I've covered this part before. It's part of the 5 stages of grief. The rebuttal, I guess, could be argued to be the anger. Failed, but anger nonetheless. This bargaining. If interested in this, I will link it down below, along with the last video I did on this subject. The next part that was playing on the screen, although I've taken the audio out, so I guess it's not playing on the screen, concerned the distinction between open hand and indie land. There was much confusion from Jirard, so I'm going to skip to the part where he finally understood it. It took about 3 minutes.
Yeah, so open hand and indie land are connected because open hand is
because of me.
No, because open hand is paying for indie land. Otherwise, Indieland, if it was a separate entity, Indieland would be paying for itself, not Openhand. If that makes sense.
Correct, but not every year. Not every year does Indieland get paid for by Openhand. It comes from me and.
These distinctions are quite important in the grander scheme of all arguments presented. They really are. So for the sake of it, context is important. Jirard has to be able to explain this first before we commentate any further.
And Indieland is not its own organization. The company that I founded for the Completionist is the company that puts on Indieland and all of our charity events. And typically speaking, we don't reimburse ourselves unless it's paramount to how much money we spent. But it's never been more than a couple grand, and it's not been every year. It's only been a handful of years.
I do think in the scope of this discussion, this is quite important to understand. There's a distinction between the money raised for charity, where that didn't go, and of course, what is or is not Indieland, what is Openhand, what is or is not an expense for the relevant business. The running cost aspect as well.
Okay. All right. I guess to really come down to it, the reason your reasoning for the money that, or at least the companies or organizations' reasoning for the money being in the account that wasn't really distributed to these charities year after year is because of the fact that some of these organizations told you that if you donated too insignificant of an amount instead of a large amount, it would not do as much good.
Correct. That was what was conveyed to me multiple times from multiple organizations.
Then you don't talk to them and you just give them the money that was raised for them. You don't have it sit in some kind of meh escrow until a target is hit. It's not like you ran a year-long round vaunted fundraiser with a goal of several $100,000 more than what you actually raised. So you had a justification then to leave it there, which you still didn't.
Okay. Yeah, and again, this is just me like bringing it up from the record. It's like some of these organizations, like the Alzheimer's Foundation, right?
Yeah.
So
Alzheimer's, it's an association of Alzheimer's, I believe, is what it's called.
Association of Alzheimer's. So again, with these organizations, it's like it almost like the way that you make it sound. It's almost like if I went to their websites and donated $20, they would kind of tell me, "Hey, donate more because it's just going to go to administrative fees," right? Like that's it makes it hard to kind of believe that point. You know what I mean?
Which is why when it's presented as a validation for why money wasn't donated sooner, whilst also claiming ignorance about the money being donated in the first place and not knowing what was going on, it just looks like someone clutching at a bunch of straws with nothing in them.
And for us, it's like when you say that you've been in talks with these organizations, what do you mean like in talks? Is it like a long-term partnership? Couldn't you like have written them a check right there and then for this specific year and then year after year, like the money comes in and out?
Yeah, the idea was we wanted to donate the money to an organization so that they could send a representative or someone from their organization to come forward and talk about all the good that we've done working with them.
Now this can be taken one of two ways. One, as a form of free promotion for Openhand. Fully understand that actually a good thing when it comes to trying to generate more interest in the charity's work. The second interpretation can be that it is a ego boost.
So as of now, the money, as far as your understanding, that $660,000 roughly is still sitting in your like that charity account, waiting for a benefactor at the right time.
I mean, as of this week, we've been having conversations about moving it as early as today or tomorrow, just because the pressure I got from you guys, if I'm being quite honest.
While I'm 100% glad that Karl and Muta applied that level of pressure to get that money put where it was supposed to be put, the fact that it's still leading to only at this point discussions, and the fact it only happened because of that pressure, speaks volumes about the integrity of every person involved.
Well, have you read the response that Jacques gave?
Which one?
Well, both. Have you read
one or the second one?
Have you read any of them?
I read the first one, but I have not been around today.
Okay. Because he said that what Openhand was doing was ethical, and they haven't done anything wrong, etc.
I'm going to insert that I do not consider what has happened here to be ethical at all. Money was raised. Jirard had said or implied over many years it had been or was being donated. It was then not. Therefore, that is highly unethical. It is immoral and, of course, wrong.
So it's kind of definitely conflicting opinions on whether or not what was going on was, appropriate or not.
Well, I think the ethicalness of it is talking about the government and the laws and how the organization on paper is. Like, we've never, again, no one has ever gotten paid any kind of personal expense or salary, or like there's no tax front. There's no one doing anything erroneous.
Yeah, no one insinuated that. Like, personally, I didn't insinuate that. We were just asking why the money wasn't donated. It wasn't.
Yeah,
I don't recall anyone actually saying that. The only query was why it wasn't donated, and in your refuting video, which was so well received, you didn't refute it. You tried to discombobulate the casual viewer by providing more unnecessary sources than required, when you could have simply said, the money was not donated, and for that, I am sorry. I will now rectify that now.
Because if that was a reality, the public filings would have just showcased that you guys would have worked more than 0 hours and you would have charged money to yourselves. So nobody should logically be making that specific claim. It's just the idea of ethicality when year after year you can run events and you get the article that say we raised $80,000 for dementia research, and the audience is led to believe that money is going somewhere when in reality it's just sitting in an account. And as of today, right now in this call, no one has been the beneficiary, at least in some quantitative capacity.
This is where the consequence that Jirard has to ride out must be experienced, because every voice, whether they be critic, whether they be donor, whether they be friend, fellow creator, colleague, should be heard, and from Jirard, it must be received. It is basically you wrote a check with your mouth, and the receipt is from the court of public opinion. You bring this on yourself when you do not honor what it is you seek out to do.
That's really where the idea of charity fraud comes into, because what we received in the second response privately, if that was public knowledge, like when people were donating at the time, this wouldn't even be an issue, right? Like, we wouldn't talk about this, we wouldn't have this discussion. But now that it's, you can look through public filings and you can see the story by yourself, it becomes a different situation.
Yeah. Well, what
part of me had been wondering, I have obviously already alluded to what I think he might try and do. As to what Jirard's motivations will be during this call, I believe he will try and find a way to try and reduce the impact felt by the entire brand, so that 20 mouths do not go hungry because of his cock-up. The next part might lend some credence to that.
I'm not trying to ask for forgiveness. I'm not trying to hide this, but what would you guys like me to do? Because I want to do right by everyone involved on my side, and I want to absolve myself of this as best I can, and I know I can't. And, you guys are some of the biggest creators in the space. When you guys whatever you guys will say, this is going to follow me for the rest of my life. And I just want to be able to do right by you guys and by my community and by my family at this point. And I just want...
Bargaining. See? We covered this last time. It's all about the bargaining. You genuinely think by placating Karl and Muta, you can prevent the inevitable, the fallout or the consequence, which is both. It's mutually exclusive in this one. You cannot deny what has to happen next, because this is something really crappy. It is argued to be charity fraud, and in this space, that is a big no-no. You can try and placate, you can try and bargain, but this isn't going to resonate with everyone else, especially when you then make thinly veiled threats of legal action and they decide, well then, I'm just going to play the audio on Twitter and let them decide for themselves.
The only thing, and I feel like that you should do that could make the situation better, is that $660,000 that's currently sitting, that should, instead of being earmarked like we were told by a member of the organization today, should actually be going to a beneficiary, because at the end of the day, $660,000 is going to make a difference, right? And it should have made a difference in the last several years as this foundation was operating and receiving these grants.
During Jirard's previous comments, he did go on to talk about how he'd been sitting on the money and he had been trying to work out when, but when he got the email, if he released it then, he'd get blowback. I'll be honest, you were going to get blowback regardless, because it's been more than, let's say, An acceptable window of donating is 1 week, yeah? Maybe a month, yeah? Okay, how many months have passed since with no donations made? Give all the excuses you like, you failed. And Muta is quite right here.
And that's really what you can do. It's like, there's no shame in, realizing that things got fucking wild behind the scenes, but the only way to make it right is not to let the money sit there anymore and to actually, I guess, let it do work. But I don't know, like it's I think the deception angle, because it is in a way a deceptive angle for the last several years that this has been happening, right? And it's
right.
It was going to have to come out at some point when somebody was going to look into the filings, right? It could have been us, it could have been Coffee, it could have been anybody, and that's just how the situation has unfolded.
Yes, this is the price you pay for being somebody who is held to such high regard. Once people or anyone put a theory out there or sniffed ever so slightly, you are going to be found out. I'm glad you were found out, not because it points at you being a crappy person, because everyone's crappy really, but because now the money is actually where it's meant to be. That's the only thing that matters to me, because I want that research to continue. I would have thought you would too, considering your entire motivation for this was based on your mother.
I don't know, because it's a tough situation. I honestly don't have a good answer. There's two questions here. One is more important. The more important question is what morally should be done, which is just the money donated. And then, because that's what you've been saying. That's what you've been saying. That's what this is all about, ultimately. You said you were going to do something that hasn't been done, so it must be done. And then, as far as how to come out of this in the best way possible publicly, I don't know.
To be honest, I don't think many people had given much in the way of a thought as to how one handles the situation publicly, because this really isn't our part in the story. It's entirely Jirard. Jirard has to think of the way out, but there isn't a good way out. There isn't a best option either. Optics are not on Jirard's side, and they never will be on Jirard's side, no matter how many sources he throws at you, because the onus is not on us to help find that solution. The onus is on the one person who made the claims, the one person who wrote the check with their mouth, and the one person who didn't write the check to give to the charity. The conversation continues with Muta talking about how, from a sympathetic angle, he doesn't really get involved in this area of YouTube, but now that the floodgate has been opened, the well has been poisoned, he's going to start looking into all of them. We want to make sure that creators can be trusted to do what they say they're going to do. If they raise money for charity, we want proof the money has gone there. A friend of mine, White Sith Male, he used to do a lot of fundraisers on Twitch, and he'd always post the receipt onto Twitter confirming the full amount had been sent. That level of honesty and integrity is fundamental to the entire ecosystem and the relationship between that of the creators and the audience. You may want to be something more. In the case of Jirard, a game developer, not a YouTuber, not be a slave for views like me. No, I understand that. But now your reputation is compromised. There's no PR doctor for this one. There's no spin doctor to repair it. You're going to tank as badly as Illuminati, possibly worse. And in before someone says that's an unfair comparison. Shut up, you smeghead!
What really fucks with me personally the most is now I'm going to question a lot of other YouTuber charities or a lot of other YouTuber events, because when I'm like, when we're receiving letters from the organization, the Open Hand Foundation, really anyone that says, hey, we're a 501c charity, we have to follow US federal law, everything, that's great. But what we just witnessed here is, a charity operating, making these claims, saying that you're working with people when in reality, the money's just kind of sitting there. It's going to make me question almost every YouTuber charity that I've ever donated to or worked with. And I think that's the thing that fucks with me the most, more than just this story, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's really all that can be said. At least that's all I have to say. Karl, if you want to say anything else.
Now, this particular conversation goes on for 14 more minutes. For the sake of this video, I don't need to go through that anymore. I will link it down below though. I highly recommend, if you want to listen to somebody, a group of somebody's talk, without my snarky interactions or interferences, do go watch it. I highly recommend, for the sake of context, you do that.